Hello and Happy New Year, everyone. Today we're having a peek at some of the stories we're expecting to cover in 2025. Coming up on the programme...
Preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
On January the 20th, Donald Trump will be sworn in as America's 47th president. We'll be looking at how he plans to make America healthy again with the help of RFK Jr.
Within 4 years, America will be a healthy country.
Later in the year, Canada may finally be getting rid of Justin Trudeau, who's seeking a fourth term in office. Canadians have to go to the polls at some point by October the 20th.
We're going to continue to have great conversations about what is the best way to take on Pierre Poilievre in the next election, but that'll happen with me as leader going into the next election.
And finally, the end of the world. We're not saying it's going to happen, but clearly the super rich are preparing for something, and we'll show you how it's done.
There's a possibility that there could be World War III, and unless they can jump on a spaceship and go to another planet, this is pretty much the only thing you can do.
So it's the beginning of a new year, and after all the heavy eating, time to get healthy. Nowhere is that more urgent than in America, where far too many people are obese and suffering with chronic illnesses. Now, Donald Trump, who will be sworn in for a second term on January the 20th, is promising to make America healthy again with the help of RFK Jr., who he's picked to be his new health secretary.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
When my uncle was president, I was a boy. A typical pediatrician would see one case of diabetes during his entire career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic. 74% of Americans are now overweight or obese, and 50% of our children. In Japan, the childhood obesity rate is 3%. 120 years ago, when somebody was obese, they were sent to the circus.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. may not have the same way with words as his uncle JFK, but after pulling out of the presidential race on the promise of a job from Donald Trump, the most high-profile member of America's unofficial royal family is on what he describes as a spiritual journey to cure America.
2/3 of American adults and children suffer from chronic health issues. 50 years ago, that number was less than 1%. We are mass poisoning all of our children and our adults.
RFK Jr. is very open about who he blames for America's descent into chronic ill health.
First and the worst is ultra-processed food. The second culprit is toxic chemicals in our food and our medicine.
Ultra-processed food is the kind churned out in factories containing ingredients you won't find in the kitchen cupboard, with extra fat, salt, sugar and flavour added to get consumers hooked.
Laboratory scientists who many of them formerly worked for the cigarette industry, which purchased all the big food companies in the 1970s and 80s, deployed thousands of scientists to figure out new chemicals to make the food more addictive.
An estimated 73% of the American diet now comes from these food sources, which make you fat because they're full of empty calories and strange chemicals, but sick because they contain almost none of the nutrition needed to keep us healthy.
77% of school lunches are processed foods. There's no vegetables.
A typical meal given to students in an American school will include breakfast cereals, fruit juice, chicken nuggets, corn dogs, and frozen pizza. These processed foods can pass nutritional guidelines because, for example, the tomato sauce on the pizza can be counted as a vegetable, or tinned peaches in syrup as a fruit.
Why are we allowing this to happen to our children?
The other industry which benefits from a sick nation is Big Pharma.
These agencies, the FDA, USDA, and CDC, all of them are controlled by giant for-profit corporations.
The cycle is simple and devastating. Big food gets people sick, Big Pharma provides the drugs to treat them. The money rolls in. These industries' links to the government are no conspiracy theory. Here's the issue: the Federal Food and Drug Administration is in part funded by the companies it regulates. The agency gets 75% of its funding from the fees pharmaceutical companies pay when they apply for approval for a medical device or drug. Over the past 40 years, 9 out of the last 10 FDA commissioners have gone on to work for the pharmaceutical industry. RFK Jr. says he wants to put an end to these links.
President Trump's backing. I'm going to change that. We're going to staff these agencies with honest scientists. I promise that within 4 years, America will be a healthy country. I won't fail.
Well, we spoke to Professor Robert Lustig, a world-leading expert on how food affects our health, and he said he did agree with RFK Jr. that Americans are being mass poisoned by the food industry.
The question is, how do you define poison? So most people think that food is food. Unfortunately, food can also be poison. And the question is, how do you tell which is which? Well, first question, what is everyone consuming? What is America consuming? What is the UK consuming? Well, 67% of food in America is now ultra-processed. 62% of food in the UK is ultra-processed. And so the question then becomes, since that's the majority, is ultra-processed food food? And the answer is, first you have to know the definition of food. Well, the definition is substrate that contributes to either growth or burning of an organism. Well, it turns out that the sugar in ultra-processed food, which is the single biggest ingredient, actually poisons the little powerhouses of the cells, the mitochondria. So in fact, it actually inhibits burning. And we now have data to show that it actually inhibits statural growth as well. So if a food does not contribute to growth and does not contribute to burning, is it a food? Turns out, no, it's a poison. So in fact, RFK Jr. does have a point about the food industry, because the single thing that they have added to food for their purposes, not for yours, is sugar. And ultra-processed food is the vehicle. RFK Jr. understands the role that the environment plays in disease. And to that, I give him great credit. He is an environmental lawyer and has worked in this field for several decades now. And so, he understands the problem. And I appreciate that he is trying to do something about it. Unfortunately, his stance on vaccines is so completely outlandish that it has actually ruined his credibility with the American public. And by the way, Donald Trump is not going to change anything. He likes his McDonald's cheeseburgers a little too much.
Well, Professor Lustig has his doubts, but we also spoke to an American heart surgeon who believes that RFK Jr. is the right man for the job.
RFK has been very passionate about health for a long time now, and more so, I know he's talking to the right people like Callie Means, who understand what has gone wrong in our food system, how that's tied to our pharmaceutical system, and it's really been ingrained in the framework of our society. And I fully support what RFK is talking about, what he's doing, and I do hope that him and or any other politicians are willing to take up this battle and make the changes that we need to, because our health is literally destroying our society. And it's true here in the US, it's true in the UK, and it's really true in most developed nations that we are literally being bankrupt, and we have our children that are suffering from this. So it's a battle we need to fight.
So making America healthy again is a massive challenge for Trump at home, and abroad the challenges are equally monumental. There will be tense times ahead, even with the United Kingdom. Theirs is supposed to be a special relationship, but the UK's Keir Starmer soured relations last year by allowing dozens of his party's activists to support Kamala Harris's election campaign. Trump called that election interference. On top of all that, Britain's Foreign Secretary is David Lammy, who's been very rude about Trump in the past.
A man full of such bile, such hatred, such evil.
Well, it's not looking good for the special relationship, particularly when it comes to the Chagos Islands. Keir Starmer gave them away to Mauritius last year, which infuriated many in Britain and President Trump. Here's why.
Countries go to war over territory. Nearly 100 nations are involved in an armed conflict right now around the globe, more than at any other time since World War II. But when it comes to the Chagos Islands, Keir Starmer's giving them away with a stroke of his pen.
The single most important thing was ensuring that we had a secure base.
The islands are incredibly remote, in the middle of the Indian Ocean, the kind of spot which you really have to zoom in on using Google Maps. But it's not the size that counts, it's what you do with them. And the biggest of these 60 islands is Diego Garcia, home to one of America's most strategically important military bases. It's from here that America launched countless airstrikes on Afghanistan and Iraq. All of Africa is within easy reach, as is America's only superpower rival, China. So why is Britain giving them away?
And it was just a matter of time before our only choices would have been abandoning the base altogether or breaking international law.
Britain's Foreign Secretary is right. There has been pressure on Britain, coming chiefly from the UN's International Court of Justice, which ruled the UK has an obligation to bring to an end its administration of the Chagos archipelago as rapidly as possible to complete the decolonisation of Mauritius. A view that is not universally welcomed.
Get out your maps, get out your atlases, check out the Chagos Islands, see where they are, and see where Mauritius is. A long way away.
Yes.
What is this claim? It's nonsense. It's total nonsense. Why are we doing this? Sheer political correctness, desire to look like the good guys, a desire to look as though we're unbundling the last relics of our empire. It's nonsense.
So, who has the best claim to ownership? Well, ever since becoming independent back in the 1960s, the islands have been claimed by Mauritius, which is some 2,200 kilometres away. Some in the Maldives, just 500 kilometres away, think the islands belong to them. But in fact, Britain has owned the islands for over 200 years, taking them from the French after defeating Napoleon in 1814. The French were the first to bring humans to the island, slaves, mostly from Africa, some from India, who worked on their coconut plantations from the mid-1700s. They became known as Chagossians. In the 1960s and 70s, Britain expelled their descendants to Mauritius and the Seychelles at the behest of the Americans so they could build their base on Diego Garcia. Some Chagossians complain they're second-class citizens in Mauritius. Some want to go back to Chagos, while others would actually prefer to remain British.
We deserve to be part of the negotiations, point blank. They shouldn't have made this deal without asking us what we wanted.
Whatever the UN and other bodies decided, it wasn't binding in the UK, and yet Starmer and Foreign Secretary David Lammy agreed to hand over the islands to Mauritius, pay for some Chagossians to resettle there, and pay for a 99-year lease on Diego Garcia. In other words, rent the island it had owned for the past 200 years. What a deal.
We are effectively handing over, giving up a major strategic asset in the Indian Ocean that we didn't need to give up for no conceivable purpose. And you have got to wonder, what on earth is this government doing?
Well, as you can imagine, President Trump is concerned about the future of the American base on Diego Garcia, and there are all sorts of reports that he may try to stop the deal. Chagossians are also worried about the deal, but for different reasons. We spoke to Maxwell Evenor, a Chagossian living in the UK, where there's a big Chagossian community.
My thought on this deal is simply that history is repeating itself, now repeating itself in a sophisticated way. Back in the day, in the 1965s, when my lens, the Chagossian lens, was being given away, when they were forcibly removed, there was a secret deal done between the Mauritius government and the UK's government. This should not have never happened, because this was based on a lie, that there was no indigenous people there, and they knew very well that there was indigenous people there. When they deported us, forcibly removed us to Mauritius, when we went to Mauritius, we were living in animal houses. We were always treated as second-class citizens. Now, look in 2024, how many Chagossians have made way to the UK. If there was no good reason to make way to the UK, they would still be there. And if Mauritius claims so much as they have sovereignty on the Chagos archipelago, why is there people in the Seychelles in the first place? Why Why were people forcibly removed to the Seychelles? I was born in Mauritius in the 1990s. Wasn't easy for myself growing up in Mauritius. The Creole descent in Mauritius are always treated as second-class citizens. We have a very hard time with the government, with the police, not enough opportunities at school, in education, jobs, and it has been very, very hard.
And you're generally in favour of independence rather than remaining British. Do you think
I am in favour of what my people will decide. Chagossians need to get the choice to decide their future.
To Canada now, and this may be the year that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is booted out of office. The 52-year-old has led Canada for the past 9 years and is seeking a 4th consecutive mandate.
My friends, when the election comes, when Canadians need to make a consequential choice in this consequential moment, it will be the honor of my life to lead us through it and continue building a better future. So let us fight this fight together! Merci, mes amis!
Once popular, the majority of Canadians now disapprove of him and his Liberal Party, blaming him for inflation, a housing crisis, and bringing in too many immigrants too quickly. Revelations that he dressed up in blackface as a younger man aren't helping.
Darkening your face, regardless of the context or the circumstances, is always unacceptable because of the racist history of blackface.
Of all of the different instances that you recalled, have you since been made aware or remembered of other instances, and if so, how many?
I am wary of being definitive about this because the recent pictures that came out, I had not remembered.
Trudeau's main rival is 45-year-old Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. You may never have heard of him, but he's pretty funny and direct. This exchange with a sloppy reporter is quite telling.
Right. There's going to be a lot of vested interests and bureaucracies that are going to be very unhappy when I'm Prime Minister.
Okay. On the topic, I mean, in terms of your sort of strategy currently, you're obviously taking the populist pathway.
What does that mean?
Well, appealing to people's more emotional levels, I would guess. I mean, certainly you tap very strong ideological language quite frequently.
Like what?
Left wing, this and that, right wing. I mean, it's that type of ideological thing.
I never really talk about left or right.
Anyways,
I don't really believe in that.
Okay, a lot of people would say that you're simply taking a page out of the Donald Trump book.
Like which people would say that?
Well, I'm sure a great many Canadians, but
like who?
I don't know who, but
well, you're the one who asked the question, so yeah. You must know somebody.
Well, I think he'd probably get along quite well with Donald Trump. Let's see what happens at the election. Right, to our last story now, and the end of the world. You may not have given it much thought, but those billionaires do, and that's why they're building some extraordinary bunkers. Take a look.
The doomsday clock, which symbolises how close we are to global annihilation, stands at 90 seconds to midnight. Symbolically, that's a minute and a half before the end of the world as we know it. Why? Well,
the rising tensions between the world's two most powerful countries, the United States and China.
Is it just me, or are things feeling tenuous lately?
Extreme weather. Deadly heat waves.
We've got just 2 years left to make the dramatic changes needed to prevent irreparable damage to our planet. That's the warning from the UN climate chief.
Are you also Googling things like best place to live during World War III?
AI is about to take over completely.
Robots are intelligent beings and deserve to be treated with respect and dignity.
I am not Morgan Freeman, and what you see is not real.
However, don't panic, because there is one small silver lining.
Rich people are going to be okay. Because the hottest trend is billionaire survivalist bunkers.
Yes, the wealthiest people in the world are using big chunks of their money to build subterranean safe havens in case the worst happens.
When you're a billionaire, you either go up to space, you go find somewhere else to live, or you go down.
Underneath this house and underneath this dirt that doesn't look like much is an $18 million underground bunker.
These bunkers are bespoke, but coming as standard are serious levels of security, a blast-proof construction, and top-of-the-range air filtration system. They typically have steel doors and are built at least 2 meters down to protect the wealthy people inside from explosions, disease, and marauding hordes of zombies, presumably. Immediately after the entrance come the airlocks, and all of this is overlooked by a surveillance system. And there's the escape tunnels. Billionaires' bunkers, of course, tend to have a few extras. They could be multi-storey, may have a swimming pool and gym, while others may house bedrooms with dressing rooms, even a cinema. Additionally, and more practically, they often include their own vegetable growing system and water cleaning facility. And here is just a few of those billionaires prepping for life underground. If reports are to be believed, Mark Zuckerberg recently ordered a 5,000 square foot self-sufficient doomsday bunker on his 1,400-acre compound in Hawaii. It will reportedly feature blast-resistant doors, an indoor pool and multiple bedrooms. And all that will apparently cost a reassuringly expensive $270 million.
A massive doomsday bunker.
Elon Musk and Bill Gates also reportedly have their own underground bolt holes. Musk on his 6,000-acre estate in Texas. Gates is said to have several around the world. And Amazon's Jeff Bezos has one under each of his homes. You never know where you're going to be when the 4-minute warning comes, after all. Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal, wants his bunker in New Zealand, a popular spot. The local government was not pleased, however, with the proposed plans, which included a spa, home cinema, meditation pod, and 10 bedrooms, each facing Lake Wanaka.
This exact area was becoming like a doomsday prepper paradise.
And of course, controversial influencer Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan are building a $4 million bunker in their compound in Romania with 10 bedrooms, a living room, and a pool.
All the important things you need to survive the apocalypse.
But if you're worried and don't have millions to spend, fear not. There are also budget-friendly bunkers available, or you can even build one in your back garden for as little as $9,999.
I don't have billions of dollars to build a bunker.
Naturally, not everybody can afford one of these big, giant bomb shelters. Whether it's a big shelter or a small shelter, it should give you the exact same protection.
Well, we saw Tristan Tate in that report, and we've spoken to the American who's actually building his bunker in Romania. Ron Hubbard runs a bunker factory in Texas and sells lots of them to relatively ordinary folks for tens of thousands rather than millions of dollars. We asked him how he got the job with Tristan Tate.
I believe they just follow me on YouTube, and they found me like everybody else in the world does, is they go and find me on my social media. I didn't even know his last name. I just knew his name was Tristan. He was in Romania. It wasn't until I landed at the airport, he picked me up in this beautiful blue Rolls Royce, and I saw that he was a young guy. And then we went to his house, and I saw those supercars there. And I looked at him, I go, what the hell do you do? You know?
Did they tell you why they wanted one?
He's like most of my customers. It's part fantasy and it's part, look, when you have all the money in the world and you've got enough money that you're buying supercars and Ferraris and Lamborghinis and you're just parking, you're running out of things to buy. So a lot of my customers, I think buying a luxury bomb shelter is just the next cool item on their list. Of course, they hope they never need it, but they think it's cool to have it. So if you can afford it, why not? You've got more money than God at times. Tristan does have somewhat of a prepper mentality because he's buying the food, he's getting the supplies, he's getting the bunker. So, you know, he obviously is a prepper.
How much would a modest one cost, and how quickly could it get made?
The least expensive shelter I have is a precast concrete one. It's relatively very simple. It's just a glorified tornado shelter, but it has an air system in it to keep you alive. Those start at $20,000 US. But the average shelter that I do under a house is about $150,000. And then these larger shelters that I'm doing for the multimillionaires, they're usually 300 to 500,000 because they've got the money to do them. So they'll get them with 2 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, a bathroom, a decon room, a mud room, and a generator room. So they have 8 or 9 little rooms in them. And then when you get into a bunker like, you know, what Zuckerberg or Tate brothers have, you know, they're in the $1 to $2 million range on average. And then every now and then you'll get the fluke customer that is willing to spend 5 to 10 million. And then you will get a billionaire every now and then that will spend between 30 and 40 million, and they'll build a bunker that's 25,000 square feet or 2,500 square meters.
Have you ever built one like that?
I personally haven't. I've sold them that big, but they were used. I acquire old military bunkers and I resell them. I personally have not built one that big myself yet.
Ron Hubbard there. Let's hope we don't need one of his bunkers in the new year. Anyway, that's all we have time for with this edition of Nexus. See you next week.